Hey, it's Dave. So in this video, I want to take you into a glimpse into my kids' education, the type of curriculum and activities that I have my kids do on a daily basis. I'm going to lay out all the key areas and kind of exactly how much time my kids spend with, let's say, reading or math or sports, and kind of what the general philosophy and approach I have for this. So I think it's important, though, for the bigger picture and kind of my motivation in terms of the time and energy I put into my kids' education. And it comes from asking a couple questions. It's kind of like, what is the ideal kind of form of education? What is the ideal education experience, right, for a kid? And let's say there are no barriers, there are no limits in terms of time or resources or even money. What would be kind of like, the ideal experience? And it took me back into kind of the theories of the Renaissance person, where the concept being is you don't just have like a superficial level of knowledge on different areas, but you actually achieve like proficiency and mastery in these different key areas in life. And there's a cross pollination between these key areas, but it only comes through mastery and proficiency in these areas. Like, for example, when you have sports and philosophy and math, and let's say speaking and communication, let's say these various skills intersect and they do amazing things, and new ideas come out and new kind of approaches come out because they're not just typically boxed in into one area. So that's kind of the general approach with education with my kids, which I want this renaissance, a well-rounded education, but not just at a superficial level, but really deep proficiency and mastery with the key areas in life. But I'm adding on kind of another area, which is an area of character and empathy and wisdom and truth, which I think is often overlooked in education. And I'm going to share why I think my education approach has been formulated in a way to really highlight that as the most important thing. All right, so I made a post on X, kind of laying out my education curriculum currently. And so this changes every 6 to 12 months in terms of exactly what my kids do, the time and the areas. But this is the current version. My kids are age 7 and 10 right now, and we're homeschooling. But I don't really like the word homeschooling because it puts it into a box, and it's not. Yeah, I don't have much actually influence from homeschooling in a sense. My influence comes from what's the best education possible for my kids. And we don't really use a homeschooling curriculum per se in any way, form, or fashion. We don't do typical, let's say, homeschooling materials or approaches. What I'm looking for is I'm looking for hands down the best approach, right? The best education. So here's what I've come up with, and it's 8 areas of education for now. So the first area is reading, and typically my kids spend about, let's say, an hour and a half to 2 hours per day reading, and they are voracious readers. We provide an amazing amount, just crazy amount of books, and this is a super high priority, to give them super interesting, super relevant books that they're just really fascinated over. And at different times and seasons, it's different types of books, right? It could be an adventure book or a detective series. Right now, my kids are going through Sonic the Hedgehog, books, comic books, etc., playing the game as well, really diving into that world. Before it was kind of Super Mario as well. But, it could be a whole host of different books that we're providing. I'm either ordering books on Amazon a lot, or buying used books on eBay. Last year I bought I think a few thousand, maybe 3 or 4,000, even more used books by the lot, like 500 books lots of books. And my kids love it because books are interesting. Oftentimes the books aren't interesting, so we just toss them quickly, and that's one of the skills my kids are learning, is when a book isn't interesting, they toss it because it just doesn't hold their interest. Maybe it's not at the right time, or maybe it's not at the right level, or maybe the author isn't answering the questions that my kids are curious about at this time, so that's okay. And so it's really this thing where we never try to force our kids to read any book. and never telling them, oh, this is a book you have to read, or you have to do this, or etc. You have to read in this way or at this speed. No, they can go through it really quickly. They can go through it slowly. They can pick up a bunch of books or one book. It doesn't really matter. And it's really a exercise in free choice and really going with their interest and learning how to accumulate knowledge, learning how to accumulate, right, kind of this transfer of information very quickly. I mean, it could be fiction as well too, right? And that's another way to receive a transfer of stories, right, and storytelling. Reading, in my opinion, is super crucial, and there's a few reasons for this. First, it's a great active form of learning. Like, compare this to TV, where kids are just kind of passively watching something and being told what to think, kind of what to feel at a certain time. They can't speed it up, they can't turn it off per se. I mean, they could change channels, but it's much more passive than reading, where you could decide what to read, skip pages, go fast, throw a book, do another book, etc. And I think also there's a super amount of efficiency with reading. You could, if you learn how to read fast, you can actually pick up an amazing amount of information and knowledge in such a short period of time. Just within a couple of hours, you could, read American history, or you could read, science and all these different topics, the history of, let's say, SpaceX or NASA. There's an amazing amount of things you could pick up just within, let's say, 20 or 30 minutes of fast reading. And I think one of the issues with people reading is that they have been boxed into a type of reading where it's super slow, and they have to read the way the author is kind of making them read, which is like every sentence and everything to the author's liking. I think to break that, if a kid is able to read a lot, they're able to create their own kind of approach to reading, where they read certain books super fast, read books, other books, a little bit slower. They learn how to know different styles of authors, and they have this thing of they're in control of reading. For my kids, they're reading kind of throughout the day during their down times and kind of just periods of relaxation. So let's say when they wake up, we don't really have, a firm wake up time or firm things like usually early in the morning. So they wake up kind of slowly, they head down, and before breakfast, they're picking up a book, they're reading. Even during breakfast, they're kind of reading. So sometimes they get like an hour and a half or 2 hours just in the early morning, like just around breakfast time. Other times, it'll be like half an hour in the morning, and then later on in the afternoon after lunch or something, or even during lunch sometimes, or before dinner or after dinner. Like they're just constantly reading. I mean, I don't really keep track per se of how much they read. I think at times it could be more than 2 or 3 hours a day, but probably average, I would say at least 2 hours a day. And I would say they're reading quite a lot. They're pretty proficient at reading. Like they're able to read pretty fast, and that's important because it shows me first that they're fostering the love of reading. Like they're growing that love. They really like it. They want to do it. I've never had to force them or coerce them to read. I never even remind them to read or tell them to read a book, right? Everything has been completely voluntary because they're interesting books to read, and they love knowledge, right? They love learning. Now, the reason why that's first is because I think reading provides this kind of breadth of knowledge, especially if you have a wide variety of books, and it's quick input and it's active, right, learning. And so I think this is one of the great things about reading, is to provide a foundation of learning and knowledge accumulation. All right, second off is sports. So I do tennis and table tennis with my kids. It comes out to be about an hour and a half to 2.5 hours every day. And the way we do it is usually I take them out to tennis, usually about an hour and a half, sometimes even more, 2 hours, but we're going out. I'm usually feeding balls, rallying with them. We do lots of drills, repetition, form, etc. It's helpful, and it's great that I'm really into tennis. Like I love tennis. It's my favorite hobby. And I really believe in the power of sports and exercise to develop, help. See, a lot of people separate sports with education or sports with the intellect. But to me, sports and exercise and the intellect and the body and the brain, they're all connected. I think science and data will just show this increasingly more over time, how crucial exercise and sports is to brain development and to keeping sharp, to having creative ideas, to reducing anxiety, to feeling more confident, to have better social skills. There's a whole myriad of benefits with sports and exercise. I think it's extremely underrated. So with my kids, I'm doing this. They get quite a few private lessons every week. Probably on the average, 2 or 3 private lessons. I'm teaching them pretty much every day as well. So they get a lot of kind of time and a lot of repetition hitting balls with tennis. I'm a big believer in the daily repetition of skills. And if you can just do, even if it's 30 minutes a day, daily, and being pushed hard, of course, it can't be coerced. Like, they need to want to do it as well. But you can have amazing compound improvement in a short period of time. We're also doing table tennis at nighttime. I'm doing about 20 minutes each, table tennis, sometimes more. They also get lessons once a week at least. Right now we're in Houston. They're getting daily table tennis lessons right now. But I have certain goals. Like, table tennis is secondary to tennis for me because I want my kids to develop coordination really fast. And table tennis is kind of a shortcut to that. But it's also a fun sport, something that I've played as well. And I'm actually learning with them together. But I have certain long-term goals for them with tennis and table tennis. And I want them not to just reach a superficial level or hobby level. I really want them to be really good at it. Not professional level per se, but pretty much, I would say, let's say a college level player, right? A competitive college level player. There's something in tennis which is called UTR, Universal Tennis Rating. And I'm hoping my kids get to a 10 UTR, which is very good. It's not professional. Professionals are 14, 15, UTR 16, but still it's way beyond just a hobby level, and that's kind of goal I have for them. The third area is math, and now math, the kids do about 30 minutes every day, and we follow a program called Kumon. Now it's not something that really is accessible off the shelf. We sign up through a local Kumon center. We pay monthly for our kids to be enrolled in the program. They get a bunch of worksheets, a correction book, and they come in every couple months to do a level test in order to graduate. And if they don't pass the test, then they have to basically redo some worksheets until they can pass the final level test. Now, math has been something interesting. We've tried a lot of different approaches. We've tried different workbooks. We've tried apps and games and all this stuff. But a lot of the weaknesses of these other programs is that it doesn't give mastery to each skill before moving on to the next skill and next skill and next skill. And I think that's one of the kind of the fatal weaknesses of some of these apps and games. They're not building strategically the skills that kids need for math. Kumon does a great job, I think. It's not perfect. We've had to adapt a lot of Kumon for our own needs. So we actually don't even go into the Kumon Center at all, unless it's for a level test. So we actually do everything on our own, and we actually scan in and email in all of our worksheets every week. We correct it on our own. We basically guide our kids. So we do this. It's kind of a modified Kumon program where we decide which worksheets our kids do. Our kids have a big say in it. They actually decide what worksheets they want to do. But it's all leveled up, meaning it's all progressive, right? So they know exactly where they're at, how many worksheets to do, and after they finish a level, they review, and then they're ready for a test, right? It's great because I don't have to force my kids to do it because they got buy-in. And one of the things with math is if it's too hard, the kids have a hard time getting buy-in because it's too painful, right? But if it's too easy, it's boring, right? So the kids need to see progress and improvement, but they need to be at a place where it's not overwhelming, where they actually are enjoying the math and understand its benefits. And so it's kind of an interesting place. I spend a lot of time, and it's very nuanced, to help my kids understand the benefits of math, of progressive kind of compounded learning over time. I help them to appreciate how much they've improved over time. I try to make sure that the math isn't overwhelming, right? If certain concepts or worksheets are way too hard, I'll come alongside them to help them for what they need. So it's a very kind of a high touch approach to math, but making sure that every skill is mastered, right, and progressively moving on to the next skill. So overall, my kids have been doing Kumon math almost a year and a half. They've done amazingly. And initially, the first 6 months were rough because we were following the Kumon way. But when we switched to our modified approach, the kids actually have been thriving in an amazing way. All right, moving on to the fourth category, which is writing, spelling, and drawing. So kids spend about 30 to 60 minutes every day with this. For spelling, we have some spelling books and resources, and we do these daily spelling tests where they study, memorize. They have a writing time where they write in a journal, and we have a set number of pages for them to write. Of course, it's buy-in, meaning nothing is like top-down driven. It's like we have to talk with our kids. They have to understand, the level of conviction of buy-in they have, how much they want to write. So it's this kind of collaboration in deciding, right? The types of activities or the amount of writing. And we have drawing time where they actually draw and sketch and copy other things and come up with their own things. And so to bring all this stuff together, we actually, let me give you a glimpse into kind of a typical day where we'll have kind of a lazy morning. This is throughout the year because, this education system is just ongoing every day. But basically, we kind of have a slow morning. Slow breakfast. I cook them breakfast, but they're reading, doing stuff in the morning, playing, relaxing. We go out to tennis for an hour and a half, 2 hours. They sweat a lot, they work hard, and they like it, and I make sure they like it because I make sure it's fun. And that's one of my priorities, is to make sure like it's fun and exciting. We come back for lunch or we eat out. Usually we come back, they're again relaxing, hanging out, playing with each other, reading, etc. After lunch, in the afternoon, we might do what we call education time. And education time for our kids is a combination of math, writing, spelling, and drawing all together. So it's usually probably takes about an hour and a half or so. And it's usually self-directed. We usually aren't, doing much with our kids. We might remind them about the time to start. We might intervene if there's really difficult problems or they need help. They're like, oh, please help me, this is crazy or something. But but it does take this nuanced touch where we need our kids to be at this place. And the most important theory, in my opinion, is called the zone of proximal development. The idea is kids learn the most, not when they're the most comfortable or not when they're the most overwhelmed, but when they're in that place of slight discomfort where it's beyond their abilities to do it by themselves, but they're able to do it kind of with help of others or structure or program or something. They're able to do more than they can do themselves. And that zone of proximal development is where kids can really thrive. And it's really difficult to, because each kid is different. They have their own emotional tolerance, their own intellectual abilities, their own various issues they deal with. So it really has to match each kid and to bring them into that zone of proximal development where they're really being pushed, but not too hard, but being in this place of discomfort where they're really learning new things beyond what they can do themselves. It's a lot of watching and seeing the kids, are my kids, and saying the right things, explaining, giving them perspective, helping them with difficult problems, giving them the vision and a motivation to push hard to get the benefits of certain things, right? It's amazing how much kids can get motivated if they buy into something, right? Kids can have goals and they can really want to get those goals. But I think a lot of times parents kind of trivialize, right, the kids' abilities to have goals apart from bribes and punishment. I'm talking about just like natural consequences, like compounded learning, right? I mean, this stuff like kids can understand and grasp and they really want it, but they also need parents, I think, or the teacher, whoever, to come alongside, help them through the difficult moments to stay in that zone of proximal development. This is also another reason why I think certain apps aren't ideal in a lot of ways, because you need so much nuance and observation of the student to help them keep in that zone of proximal development. And the problem with apps is they don't observe the student enough, and they don't have the ability really to, in a nuanced way, motivate and communicate and inspire right? The kid. Same thing with AI. Like, I'm a big believer in the power of AI, but AI has, I'm telling you, many, 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 many years to go before it can, in a nuanced way, observe a child and with nuanced touch, motivate and keep the kid in the zone of proximal development across various activities. It's just very, very difficult. It's an extremely difficult skill to have. I think humans are going to be in the loop for many, many years, actually, regarding that. Not that AI apps aren't great and can be helpful. They can, but you've got to use it in the right way and understand their limitations as well. All right. Besides that, we do second language, and we're doing this in the evening. Each kid gets about, right now, they get about 20 minutes or so via a Zoom call. Actually, 20, 25 minutes. We're kind of changing it to what they're comfortable with. So again, it's the whole zone of proximal development. It can't be too easy. It can't be too hard. It has to be right at the exact kind of level where they're uncomfortable, but they can do it with someone's help. So we found, I'm able to find some Korean tutors via a site called italki. Preply also does something very similar, but you can book teachers. We've actually created our own curriculum. Now, I've spent a few years diving into the whole language learning world and theories and apps and resources, and spent a long time actually trying to create our own app as well. But I found the limitation being, again, the zone of proximal development. It's extremely hard for an app to observe a student, see exactly what they're struggling with, and to fix or correct their exact pronunciation, etc. So anyways, we've come up with our own materials. We've used AI to actually create a lot of materials, but basically a lot of it is like simple vocabulary picture books or sentence picture books, simple sentences, simple words. The kids are able to read them in this second language, which is right now is Korean. I'm hoping, if they do well in Korean, to actually add another language. I think Spanish would be my next choice. But right now what we're doing is, during these Zoom calls, we don't have the teacher do like free form conversation or anything right now. What we're doing is we're having our kids read a word that they can read and they know what it is, and then the teacher will say that word in the native pronunciation. Our kids will repeat it. So it's this practice of listening, of pronunciating, like repeating the pronunciation, of reading the language, and actually getting used to the various meanings of different words. So it's a combination of building a lot of just vocabulary and foundation and pronunciation for our kids. Our kids are actually doing great right now. This method, we've tried a lot of different other methods, but they haven't really worked. But this method actually is really hitting the spot right now, and the kids have improved immensely over the past couple of months with a second language. Again, I'm not into kind of superficial learning the language just to, like, which I think has some value, but I really want to get them to fluency with almost perfect pronunciation if possible. And I think if they can do it at a young age, right, it's a lot easier, especially with the pronunciation. Now, second language is super important in my opinion, because it opens the world to them in a different way. It opens them to be able to glimpse into other cultures, to glimpse into other languages and values and worldviews. They're able to critique their own worldview and their own arguments, I think, even better, via learning not just a second language superficially, but very, very fluently, almost like you can go back and forth with different languages. You're able to critique and have a stronger viewpoint, because you're able to quickly process various other viewpoints more quickly. There's also a ton of brain benefits to learning a second language fluently. And part of that is the whole area of your brain responsible for forming language and using language. You start to use less and less energy for language formation if you know multiple languages, because it's so efficient, right? Your brain is so good at it, and you're able to use extra energy for other tasks, which I think that brain uses to actually form better arguments, to communicate better. There's just a myriad of benefits, I think, that are often underlooked, underappreciated with learning a second language to fluency. All right, the sixth area is piano or music. Now my kids are doing about 20-30 minutes a day practicing piano. We have various apps, various kind of sheet music we give them. They learn how to sight read. They're learning, different songs. There's a few other things we're doing with music. My wife loves to sing and play guitar and piano as well. So she's also teaching them a bit how to sing. They're constantly around music. We're listening to music all the time. But again, with music, I think the temptation is just kind of a superficial level into music. But yeah, I really want them to get to this place of real proficiency and mastery with music, where they can like hear a song and play it on the piano with just hearing the song like once or twice, and they can sing really well. And they have this connection with music where they can not just create it, but empathize and feel it. And again, going back to my original first comments, is there's a lot of cross-pollination between these areas that I think people miss out on because they don't get into that one area deep enough, right? There's cross-pollination between, let's say, music and sports, or music and reading, or math and sports, or just so many different things. And the more you put into that picture of mastery of different key areas, the more cross-pollination and the more kind of connections are going to form, which lead to better ideas, more creativity, better execution, and just a whole host of other benefits. All right, number 7 is game and game design. Now I specifically added this for my kids because my son, 10 years old, is super interested in games design. He's got this crazy amount of creativity where I want to help him. I want to help him develop that. And so I want to give him a good exposure to games, to video games, to game design, to making games, and all of this. So, they have a set amount of time after education. Kind of their internal reward is to do some type of, let's say, iPad game for 30 minutes after their so-called education time, which is the math, writing, spelling, and drawing time. We'll also do some stuff where I might introduce a new game to them, play with them, whether it's like Super Mario or Sonic the Hedgehog or something, and then we'll get into it for like a month or two. Things like that, where they're able to really spark their imagination. We do a lot with AI. So my 10-year-old and 7-year-old are making games with Claude, Sonnet, with Replit, and it's exciting. And they're keeping track of what the AI can do and what they have a hard time doing. Always coming up with new ideas, sketching out stuff, sketching out screenshots, designs, like all of this stuff. They're able to get into at a young age. All right, so the next category is number 8. I call it other, and it's because these are some areas that we haven't carved out enough time and commitment and priority yet in order to put them into our daily kind of schedule or routine as a priority. But there are things we're starting to do, which I think have some potential. The first is Taekwondo. So it's basically martial arts. Actually, Taekwondo, the English pronunciation, which is fine. But my wife actually has a red black belt in Taekwondo, so she's able to teach our kids. But she has to kind of get back into it because she's kind of rusty. It's been many, many years. Golf. So I think golf is cool, interesting sport. It's not as active as tennis. That's why I'm not prioritizing it as much as tennis. But golf is great. Something you can enjoy. Lots of walking. We're fortunate where we had some space in our room, and I started to investigate, and we were able to put some type of golf simulator in our house, which the kids can use to basically play golf indoors, which is pretty cool. And it's not that we have a separate like room just for that. It's a multi-purpose room. It's our exercise room and all this stuff. But we got this like retractable screen that the kids are able to use. So they've been doing that on and off, but they're actually getting better with golf. It's surprising, like just 10-15 minutes a day. And their swings have actually improved a lot. And a lot of this stuff is, the more stuff you do, actually, the more efficiency is important. Like, for example, if you really have an ambition for like this Renaissance type of education approach with your kids, where you want to have them go deep into all these areas, then efficiency really matters. Because if you aren't efficient and you're spending 5 hours on one thing every day, it's like you're not getting the breadth in terms of the number of different areas you don't have time to get into these other areas. And so, yeah, there's a big question. It's like, how much time do you need for each area to surpass the superficial level, really get into proficiency and mastery in that level? But also, how much is too much in a sense? Like, I mean, later on, I think my kids are only 7, 10, so a lot of it is I'm deciding, directing, coaching, collaborating with my kids. But later on, they're going to probably decide more and more increasingly what they want to do in terms of focus and specialization. But yeah, it's an interesting kind of thing to think about. I mentioned singing. We use AI throughout the day constantly. Teaching my kids skateboarding, also trying to teach them rollerblading. Part of it is balance. My kids, I think sports, balance is super important. So I'm trying to help them a lot with that. A few notes on some of these things is my kids actually aren't naturally like athletic or coordinated or strong in that sense. And yeah, it's actually kind of they can be very challenged in some areas physically, and this is what makes this area of sports and exercise actually so much more important to me as a parent. Naturally, I don't think it would be an area that they would be inclined to really dive into and really get good at. They would be more inclined to like reading and games and all this other stuff. But sports and exercise, I think, is so crucial, especially for certain kids who are very, let's say, challenged with it. And there's a whole host of benefits, let's say, coordination can bring, or just like sweating a lot, like the intensity of exercise, the character that it builds, the strength that it could build. There's so much stuff with exercise that is so important. And I've decided to take the reverse rather than shy away from it because my kids weren't inclined with it. I've taken this approach where I'm diving into it even more, prioritizing it even more. And it's a big challenge. There are many nights where I sleep and I have so many questions and problems I'm trying to deal with my kids, let's say sports and exercise. I'm like, how can they get better at this? Or how can I help motivate them, right? Regarding some area with sports or exercise, or like, how can I get them stronger? Or how could I get them more coordinated? Or, if they're frustrated or something, how can I help them with that frustration? And so a lot of my kind of like, questions at night right now, past year or so, have been like, how can I help my kids in these areas that they're most challenged in, but I actually see the most benefit if they can overcome and really build proficiency and mastery. So let's talk about the area of the question of downtime here. So I think one mistake with a curriculum or an approach that I'm doing with my kids is to be so rigid where and so busy where you don't have any like free time or relaxed time or play time or imagination, creative time. And it's very hard to have so many things going on while prioritizing kind of almost the opposite, which is like this void, a time of void in a sense. And the way I've kind of reasoned it is actually creating and building and free play and all this stuff is super, super important. Actually, I should probably put that as like a major criteria. But it's so important that I actually almost put it as important as all the other stuff combined, meaning like the reason why we have a slow morning is because I want them to be relaxed and free and able to read and play and draw and create stuff. And the reason why we have a few hours in the afternoon, a few hours in the evening. So we have these blocks of free time, a couple hours in the morning, afternoon, evening time that they're free and they're able to just do stuff, right? Cut out some stuff, build some stuff, draw some stuff, play, talk, read some books, all that stuff. And I think it's important for kids to have that freedom because that gives them the sense that they are in control, that they have the agency to do what they want to do and to create and to build. Super important. Second thing I want to talk about is efficiency. I touched about this is the more stuff you have going on and the higher ambitions you have in terms of your kids to have not just a superficial level of knowing what to do, knowing how to do these things, but actually have proficiency and mastery. The more ambition you have across the more areas, the more important it is to have efficiency in those areas. But here's the problem: when you go for efficiency usually don't get that high level of proficiency and mastery in that area. And that's where there's a hack where if you can have a super high kind of out of the box approach to certain things where it's like super high level. Like for example, if you had the world's best art teacher come to your house every day, maybe you can get a lot more done, let's say with kids learning how to do art, than let's say a mediocre or average art teacher, right? So let's say average art teacher teaches the kids 2 hours a day, but let's say world-class art teacher teaches in 30 minutes, but maybe the world-class art teacher will teach more in 30 minutes than the average art teacher in 2 hours, right? And so that's kind of the approach to efficiency, and the hack is this constant pushing and researching and finding new ways and new methods to get more out of the learning process than what is traditionally or typically experienced. So I'm constantly doing this on like a daily basis. I think this is probably one of my the most time consuming things I'm doing is I'm constantly I do like probably like 20 or 30 ChatGPT deep researches every day on various topics. Most of them are related to how do I speed up or how do I improve teaching, learning, right? The whole experience, motivation. But yeah, it's like, how do I teach tennis in a way where a lot of other kids, let's say they get into 12, 13 years old, the like high level tennis kids, they're spending, 3 to 4, 5 hours, sometimes 6 hours every day with tennis. Can I do that in 90 minutes, right? How long does it take, right? Yeah, can I teach a second language to point of fluency in like 30, 40 minutes a day versus 4 hours a day, which a lot of people say are required? There's a lot of questions like that I'm struggling through. And as I struggle through them and research, I'm having to kind of come up with my own approach on these different things. And yeah, it's quite interesting. And a lot of it is like, for example, with tennis, I've done probably the most research amongst my research in terms of how to speed up the learning, how to teach correctly, and finding that it's difficult to find the right coach or right teaching because I'm coming up with my own ideas in terms of what my kids need to improve quickly but efficiently at the same time. All right. I want to also talk about this idea of the power of daily practice and compounding. So there is, I think, an overlooked principle and idea, which is when you practice something daily, not just going through the motions, but actually practice it in the zone of proximal development where you're pushed out of your comfort zone and you're really learning at a super fast pace. But you do that every day, even if, say, it says 20 or 30 minutes per day, there's a huge amount of compounding that's going on that I think is just amazing. And especially if you can take advantage of that with kids at a young age, I mean, it's amazing what kids can do. Like one example is, just 20 minutes, 25 minutes a day of table tennis every day, also supplementing it with lessons from good coaches. It's like by pushing my kids in a super efficient way, but doing it daily in like about 8 months or so, 9 months, my kids have improved with table tennis in a crazy amount. It's crazy. Yeah, it's just amazing. Like math, we're seeing the same thing. Piano, language, like across the different skill sets, right? We're seeing a huge amount of improvement because it's daily in the zone of proximal development, and that is compounding over time. But here's the other thing, is the role of persuasion and buy-in. So I don't think you can get the same results if your kids don't have the buy-in themselves. Like if you as a parent, you're forcing your kids or coercing your kids to do certain things and they're just going along for the motion with the motions, you're not going to get the same amount of improvement and learning compared to if the kid had buy-in themselves, that they're doing it because they really wanted to. And that's one of the core principles that underline my whole approach to education, is that kids need to buy into it. They need to want to do it. They need to want to learn. That once you start coercing and forcing the kids to do something, you basically are sabotaging the whole approach, and you're basically ruining their education by coercing them, because you're introducing kind of this resistance and bitterness to learning that wasn't introduced or wasn't there before. Like, you don't want bitterness, like tension, frustration, like, resentment in their realm of learning. You want it to be fun, exciting, just a joy. You want them to feel the dopamine and adrenaline of improving and learning new things. And I think by coercing is just I think it's the worst thing you can do with education. Now, I think people tend to try to coerce through different ways, where they go, they have some punishments, right? If you don't do this, you'll have this punishment, or bribes, like, if you do this, we'll take you out, or buy you this gift or this toy or something. I don't think those are great things either. Those are external motivation, kind of external factors you're placing onto your kids, where your kids aren't learning for the benefits of learning themselves. You're tackling on these external type of things that the kids know that, this learning activity itself doesn't have any benefits. That's why my parents are tackling on these other things, right? Because they just don't understand, why I should do this learning activity. And I think that's a cop-out. Parents should dive into why it's important to learn what they're expecting their kids to learn, and be able to express that and be able to convince your kids in a way they don't feel coerced, where they get buy-in to do that learning activity because they innately see the benefit and the power of that learning activity. Like, that's how we get kids who are into it. That's how we get empowered kids, high agency kids who don't feel like they're just being tossed around by, different systems and adults who just, push these like external bribes and punishments to force them to and manipulate them to do certain things. No, the kids need to feel like they're in control. Kids need to feel like they're learning things that they want to learn. Kids need to feel like they're spending their day in a way that they want to spend their day. Now, I'm not saying that parents should be hands off and let the kids just play video games all day. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there's a collaboration that needs to happen, where the parents need to, in a high touch, nuanced way, need to form and shape perspectives and worldviews and values and ideas and principles with their kids, so that the kids really dive into and get buy-in to the most important things that the kids can be doing on a daily basis to compound and give great benefit to their life, right? It's kind of like investing. You're getting buy-in for your kids to invest in their activities and habits. So you're basically saying, what would be the best investment of your time, on a daily basis that compounds over time and leads to a crazy amount of, benefits and stuff. And what you're doing is you're teaching your kids how to invest on a daily basis, how to use their time to get the best results. And you're doing that on a constant basis. And it's not just saying, kid, you do whatever you feel like doing, but you're hands off and you're not even helping them to make the right decisions, right? And that's not the best way, in my opinion. The best way is you're holding the sanctity of their decision-making process, of their independence, of their being, which is able to make decisions and see things and feel coercion, but also feel self-empowerment. You want to avoid the coercion, the feeling that they're just like forced to do stuff, and you want to empower, to stir up, right? The feeling of understanding, of being able to dictate and make decisions that affect the rest of their lives. And that's what we need to do, I think, as parents on a daily basis, which is basically help our kids understand the profound nature of how a lot of their decisions and activities they do on a daily basis is basically forming habits which over time have huge compounding results. Like, for example, my kids do 6 months of table tennis for 20 minutes a day, and they go from like basically nothing to like, able to do some decent rallies. Like, that's amazing. And the kids need to have that insight, meaning the parents need to show the power of daily compounding and cast a vision, right, of that. For example, in the beginning, I was showing my kids videos of other kids doing table tennis, telling them about the power of daily compounding, seeing if they wanted to even try to do a daily practice, right, and compounding investment into table tennis. I'm spending time. It's high touch nuance. It's not something I just go, one day it's over, just do it, kids. No, I'm doing this for weeks and weeks, right? Kind of nurturing, high touch, right? Communicating, persuading, casting the vision until they really want it inside and they really want to go for it and they understand the benefits of the compounding activity that they want to do, and they understand I'm going to come alongside and help them to do that, and they're going to see this great result in 6 months or 12 months, or let's say in many years. Like, that's the idea, and it takes a very hands-on approach with a parent or a teacher, whoever that is, to be able to cast a vision, get buy-in for the kids to understand the benefits where the kids make that decision. Right? The kids have ownership, right? And so it's not this either or thing where some people think that, oh, parenting is you either are hands-on and controlling or you're hands-off and the kid is independent, right? No, it's not that. Like, that to me is like such okay, I don't want to be disrespectful, but to me that's a very childish, immature and incomplete way of looking at parenting, or a lot of things for the matter. But to look at parenting as this either or thing, either hands-on and total controlling, or you're hands-off and like the kids are independent. Like, that to me is like that thinking, that immature kind of, I would say, boxed in, narrow way of thinking has done more damage to parenting than I think maybe almost anything else out there. And so as a parent, a lot of people feel like, okay, I either have to be in control and hands-on and controlling, which what parent kind of wants that? Unless you're like really fearful and like type A controlling type of person, maybe, I don't know. Or you go, okay, I need to be hands-off because I don't want to be like that, helicopter parent who's always hands-on or something and controlling. And so go, I'm hands-off, and you leave everything to school or leave everything to other people, to their friends or teachers, thinking their kids are going to turn out well. Well, I have news for you. Like, what guarantee? Obviously, you don't have any guarantee, but what are the chances that your kids are going to turn out well when you are so hands-off? Like, I don't know if what your chances really are. Maybe you get lucky. Maybe you get lucky with great teachers, with great friends, whatever, or you have low standards or something, a combination. I don't know what it is, but I personally am not willing to take those odds, because I think there's a better way of going about it, which is, as a parent, and I'm grateful and thankful that I do have the resources and the time and energy to be able to invest into my kids' lives. I know a lot of parents just don't have that. They're not in the situation where they can really invest into their kids' lives, and they have to take that decision of handing off, right? A lot of their education, a lot of their responsibilities to other people, to school, etc. And that's fine, and I totally 100% understand that. But I'm saying, for a person in my situation, my personal view is, if I have the space, the energy, the resources, everything, and I actually understand, right, what's going on in the bigger picture with what's happening with my kids, then I'm going to take that responsibility, where I'm, number one, going to preserve my kids' independence, preserve their sense of autonomy, preserve their sense of high agency, meaning they're going to feel in control. They're going to feel like they're deciding, that they're leading their lives in a sense. But I'm also going to come alongside, very, very high touch, very, very nuanced, to help shape their ideas and perspective and their value and their character and the different decisions, where I'm helping them understand, right, the power of compounding, right, with what they're doing and the habits that they're forming, and giving them opportunities and things to really invest into their lives to build more knowledge, to build more skills, to build more exposure, to build more knowledge, to build more understanding, and to build more character, right? That's what I'm helping my kids do, but yet at the same time preserving that sense where they don't feel like their parents are encroaching on them and controlling them, forcing them to do stuff, whatever, where they feel like, hey, I'm in control, I'm deciding what to do, and how I'm, learning and spending my time. I mean, it's a very, very, I think, difficult thing to balance, but it's something that I think you can balance if you have two extremely high priority principles working together, which is one is this high principle of I need to be involved in my kids' lives to plant and seed and to help shape and form ideas, values, perspectives, right? Understanding. At the same time, I need to treat their autonomy and decision making as sacred. And you hold these two values or perspectives right together almost with the same hand, then you're able to do a good balancing job. But I feel like if you neglect one or the other, like it's not possible. Most people, I think, kind of resort to one form or fashion of too hands-on in terms of controlling, or too hands-off in terms of the kids completely independent and you're not really investing and helping shape their ideas and values and perspective enough. So yeah, I think it all comes down to the question of what is the role of the parent, right? And I think the role of a parent also, again, it could change according to how much time and energy you have. If both parents are working full-time, barely making ends meet, that's going to be a different perspective or situation than, let's say, a family with at least, let's say, one parent who's able to be full-time investing into their kids. But what I'm saying is that I think what's missing a lot in today's society is the idea that with even just one parent, let's say, able to full-time invest in their kids, there's plenty of things to do to invest into the kids. I feel like what we have today is this whole idea of, okay, one parent's home or full-time or something, then a lot of times it feels like people don't think that the parent could do much, right? They just like hand them off to some after-school programs, hand them off to some sports teams or whatever, hand them off to whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't think that you're getting as much as you can get out of the kids' education or their upbringing. And I think there's a lot more we could do. There's a lot more we can push the envelope with pushing our kids to mastery and extreme proficiency across different areas, seeing that cross-pollinate, really seeing a Renaissance child, Renaissance man or woman education come to fruition. And I think this is probably one of the most crucial things we could do as parents to prepare our kids for the future. It's like in the future, what's going to be of value. And I think, we're going to need to see people who know how to stand up for themselves, who make clear decisions, articulated decisions, who clearly think and have critical thinking. Kids or humans or adults who take a responsibility over their actions, who have a comprehensive worldview that's different, that's stronger, that's just sees things more clearly. And I think the cross-pollination across different areas is going to lead to a lot of creativity and lots of high agency. When I say high agency, I'm talking about a lot of inert kind of inner conviction, right, and drive to do things. So yeah, I think this is probably one of the best things we could do as parents, I think, to prepare our kids for the future. Lastly, or not lastly, near lastly, is this idea of the parent's physical presence and wisdom. So one of the reasons why I personally don't think I can get a comparable education for my kids in a public or private school is because of two things. First, I don't think that a lot of places are really focused on the efficiency that I'm focused on in terms of giving my kids education, but also the depth and mastery and in enough broad areas, right? So meaning a lot of times, because you're dealing with a lot of kids too, right? Where you're not going to really take them into mastery across a bunch of different areas. It's just so hard. Going back to the idea of the zone of proximal development, it's hard for one teacher to take 30 kids into the sweet spot of learning where they're uncomfortable but doing more than they can do on their own, etc. It's very, very hard. It's extremely hard to even do it with one kid or two kids, right? But to do that across many different areas, it's extremely hard and difficult for, I think, institutions to do that, especially with the students, the population there. Another thing is, beyond the effects or the accumulation of skill and knowledge across all these different areas, let's say whether it's reading, and I incorporate under reading like all these different things of like science and history and social studies, all this stuff. With reading, you can actually learn a ton. With math, with sports, with piano, music, game design, all this other stuff across many different areas. Like beyond all of that, I think what's even more important than all of that, which I think is super important because I'm spending like, countless hours with my kids and researching, trying to make these areas like super efficient, but also push them to mastery and get their buy-in, right? To see the benefits of that. So I am a super strong opponent of that, of the Renaissance man kind of education. But I think what's even more important than that, meaning the skills and education or skills and knowledge across all those areas, is actually the wisdom of making the right decisions, the empathy to be able to connect, on an emotional, relational level, the depth of thinking where you can ponder life's bigger questions with sincerity and introspection and actually some interesting insights. Like there's a different side of things which is almost intangible in a sense. Like you're not going to take a test about them and say what % you got on the test per se, right? There are things of like, how you treat a person, right? How you respect every human being. There are things like how you make a decision, how thoughtful you are. And I feel like a lot of these things, like I'm trying to teach my kids, but it takes a lot of just in-person, human-to-human touch time where I'm constantly talking with them, living my life with them, imparting like everything I do with them. So it's this constant daily conversation, morning to evening, about just a ton of different topics, how I view things and think about things and what I'm doing. And then it's also kind of like this living together, this like, feeling like they're feeling that I'm with them, I'm their companion and in life, and we're going through things and helping them navigate situations. And it's kind of like, a guide in a sense, but also a person that's able to really help shape kind of the more deeper things, right? That typically don't fall under so-called education or skills or knowledge. And that to me is something where I don't think I could really buy somewhere. Meaning, I could send my kids to private school, and I don't know if I really would want to right now. Maybe later on, I don't know, who knows. But I don't think they'll get as good an education as I'm doing and my wife is doing right now. I don't think it'll compare. I don't even think they'll get 50% of what they're getting in terms of skill and knowledge and across all these domains. Even with the best private school out there, at least with where they're at with their age. I don't know about the future. But what they'll miss out the most, in my opinion, is they'll miss out the most with time with me and time with my wife, and the opportunities that I take advantage of to really build and shape their values, perspective, their ideas, and all that. And that's a huge priority. Like I'm intentional with it. I'm focused on it. I look for opportunities. I treasure those opportunities to really teach them and impart them ideas, wisdom, understanding on things. And I do that all day, and that's super important. If I send my kids to a private school, they're not going to get that from me, at least as much as they do right now, which is constantly throughout the day. And to me, that's priceless. That's what I want to pass on to my kids. Is sure, I want to pass on great education, knowledge, skill, all this other stuff, which is important. I spend a lot of time on it. But most importantly, I want to pass on wisdom and understanding and Yeah, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And that's why it's a huge priority. And it's probably the biggest reason why it's hard to outsource this, right? It's hard to outsource what I'm doing to a school or to, you know, a private, nanny or tutor or whoever. I mean, I'm all for outsourcing what I can, and yeah, I take advantage of lessons. I take advantage, of sports lessons with table tennis, um, always open to music, art lessons, all this other stuff. Open to help with all these ways, but like to do it to outsource my full time or the responsibility of kind of imparting on a daily basis interaction and kind of that hands on um, nurturing of my kids and their ideas and perspectives and values and all that stuff. Yeah, I just don't see it. I just don't see the value of me doing that and the results being as good as it could be with me doing it. Now, who knows? There could be other people who are like outsourcing it, they get better values, right, than the parents. So each situation is different, right? Each perspective is different. There's a whole host and whole myriad of different situations out there. So I'm not one to judge per se. All right, but I wanted to just share kind of my perspective on what kind of a curriculum or schedule looks like. So going back to what a daily schedule might look like, kind of like a lazy morning a little bit, but we might head out around 10 or so, do tennis for a few hours, maybe 10 to 12, who knows, get tons of exercise. But I cast a vision of high performance, meaning we're trying to get really good at this, right? We're constantly watching like professional videos, forums, all this stuff, getting high level coaching, teaching, all that stuff. You might have lunch, you might do some so-called education time, an hour and a half. They might do some games, some other stuff. We might actually do another sports thing in the afternoon as well. They're doing lots of reading, lots of downtime, a couple hours in the morning, afternoon, evening for different stuff they can do. In the evening, we're doing like piano, table tennis. My wife might teach some taekwondo, or they might do some singing. Yeah, and yeah, always just exploring, pushing, the limits of what, my kids can grow in and how they can learn. Overall, though, I'm personally having a great time. I'm very, very thankful as a parent to be entrusted with this responsibility for my kids. And yeah, I really feel like my kids are blossoming in a way that I never expected. Like they're far beyond their years in terms of maturity and their perspective in life. But they're super fun kids. They're constantly laughing, joking around, playing around all day long. They've got high energy. Yeah, and they have high agency too, meaning they really have put a lot into what they're doing because they feel like they're in control, right? They've really bought into a lot of just perspective and ideas of they're building, they're compounding, their activities compound, and they're really seeing the benefits to that, and they've bought into that. And so, yeah, I don't find myself arguing with my kids a lot. I mean, a lot of it is the time and energy I put in initially, like the first several years of their lives, really building into a lot of the stuff like foundationally. It makes it so much easier later on in life because they got this foundation of values and perspective. Anyways, feel free to leave any comments in this video. I'll try to read them, and maybe I'll put together some of the questions together and make a video kind of addressing some questions and sharing some more ideas. All right, take care. We'll see you guys later. Bye.